Hi folks, Eric Goldberg here with the Interphase conference crew. Welcome to the 12th annual Interphase Seniors Housing Southeast Conference. We're glad you're all here. We have a strong lineup of panel sessions and networking for you today. We're going to start off with our first panel of the day, which is called Design and Build, Architecture, Design, and Construction Trends. I am going to introduce the panel moderator, Tyler Kovarek. Tyler is the Senior Vice President of Schaefer General Contracting's Florida operations. He has played a vital role in expanding the company's presence and impact across the Southeast with nearly 25 years of industry experience and a deep understanding of the complexities that define the senior living market. Tyler leads with a commitment to building confidence in Schaefer's clients, their communities, and their residents. Let's have a warm welcome for Tyler Kovarek.
Test. All right, that's working. So thank you for the kind words, Eric. I'm going to let the rest of the panelists introduce themselves here.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jeff Mock. I'm Vice President with Clancy & Thays Construction Company. We're a Southeast regional company headquartered out of Raleigh. I help lead our office down in Florida, which is located in Orlando, as well as lead the senior living market sector for our whole organization. And I've been with Clancy & Thays for 29 years. So started when I was 8 years old.
Good morning, I'm Chris Frommel. I'm from Direct Supply in Milwaukee. Direct Supply has been in the industry for 40 years, and we provide our clients and our customers with solutions for products, for spend management, and for building solutions. I lead our Aptura division, which is part of our building solutions group, as you can imagine. We're a full service turnkey solution, planning, design, procurement, and construction services.
And I'm David Fick. I'm with LBA. We're one of the largest architecture firms that specializes in senior living. I'm a father. I'm a new grandfather, so I got a smile on my face most of these days, but I just so happen to specialize in senior living.
I'm Connie Whittick. I'm with Metropolitan Studio. I started Metropolitan Studio years ago, and we specialize in lifestyle, hospitality, resorts, and a deep root in senior living. And we have an office in Baltimore, Maryland, and also in Park City. And our work is global. We do a lot of senior living projects across the country. So we're excited to be here.
Yes, so excited to be here as well. Jumping right into our first topic. Historically, senior living spaces have prioritized functionality over comfort and aesthetics, but we're seeing a real shift to experiential branding and hospitality-inspired concepts. So what is the defining trends we're seeing in design for the modern senior, and what is driving those trends? Chris, if you would like to start us off.
Yeah, we at Direct Supply, we host a conference every June, a development conference, and in preparation for that, we do a lot of research. Every 2 years, we send out a survey called What Do Seniors Really Want? We query about 1,000 seniors, 50% male, 50% female, ages 70 to 90. And one of the most interesting dynamics is that 75% or more of those respondents say that they don't plan to move in the next 5 years. So they're mentally entrenched in where they are at home. They like the comforts of home, and as you extrapolate that into what we all do, in designing for this generation and the next generation of seniors, it's got to be more hospitality-like. There has to be great amenities to attract them to want to come to your building. Typically, there's going to be a need for downsizing or a health event that triggers the need for a move, not just an election to move. There's got to be great social spaces because this generation of seniors still wants to be social. So what are the food service, the bar, the bistro, the dining amenities? We see that the kitchen spaces and dining are top of the list of what people want in their spaces. And we know that with this boomer generation, security, safety, comfort, all has to resonate. So walking in the front door day one or living in the building, year 10 has to feel safe, secure, comfortable. And a lot of that means designing locally, making sure that there's local connections that resonate the sense of place, where they grew up, where they lived, where they raised their children, where they worked. That has to come through in the design to attract today's seniors.
So I'm going to add to that. We're seeing a lot of health and wellness. Health and wellness is a huge, need and want for the upcoming generations. And we're also seeing definitely the experiential design piece. But we're also seeing total hospitality, and because people want to live in beautiful places, and when we are installing and photographing, we get a lot of feedback from the first few residents that are living in the community, and this is changing my life. It's changing how my mental health. And so I think health and wellness and mental health are at the top of the list.
I think also social interaction can be so understated in the fact that they not only want the social interaction in their own community, but with the greater community. And so being able to interact with people that are multi-generational really keeps people younger. I know that when I play with my granddaughter, or if I'm hanging out with my sons, I think I'm younger until my body starts to tell me different. And I think that's true with our residents as well, is that they want to interact with other people. And so finding ways to create spaces that allows the community to come in, or for them to go to the ground floor, let's say in a multi-story building, and be out in the community is very important.
I think that's critical, and I'll take a little personal bent to that. Right now, we live in a multi-generational household. My in-laws relocated from 4 hours away to stay with us for a couple weeks while they transitioned into a senior housing environment. And a year plus later, that transition's still going on. But we've got our 21-year-old living at home. We've got the upper 80 in-laws living at home, and my wife and myself, and we bring in caretakers to help throughout the day. They love that engagement with different people. It can't just be, designs for today's seniors can't just be a room where people hang out and watch television. They're not going to thrive there. There needs to be spaces for social engagement, and spaces that they can choose the kind of social engagement that's most comfortable for them. That is going to let them live their best life and thrive, thrive in their later days.
Of late, we're getting requests from different clients to travel out to see existing facilities. And Fix just, they're like, we have a group of people here that are in front of the TV all day, and how can we change the design to eliminate that issue and make their lives more engaging? And also we travel really across the country looking at different buildings for our clients, and they're saying we have X amount of money to spend, and how can we spend it wisely to enrich the residents' lives that are living here, but also elevate our community and attract. We're X amount of occupancy, and we want to attract the next. We need to up the occupancy, or they've taken over a new community. So that's something that we've seen a lot of.
Well, building on the multi-generational, what are the shifts you're seeing between, as the generations change, kind of the baby boomers, but now planning for the next generation of seniors as they come in? Are you seeing anything with that?
I think right now the boomers are really looking for the safety, security, comfort, sense of location. As we get to the next generation, it's going to be a lot more digital. I think about my parents. My mom's got a smartphone. My dad refuses to get a smartphone. He's got a flip phone. So right now, today's seniors are still a generation that are not quite all digital. But when you get to that next generation, the folks who are in their 60s now, it's going to be full on digital. So making sure buildings have the infrastructure capability to have all the digital entertainment, digital communication, that's going to be increasingly critical. But I still think all the basics that we're talking about, socialization, biophilic design, access to natural light, that's going to be a foundational element that needs to stay.
Connie, do you have something to add?
Yes, we're seeing health and wellness, the gyms and the multi-purpose spaces are getting larger. Pickleball's moved into the the big auditoriums. So the design of the transitional spaces and large spaces are changing. And I really think the activities, the physical activities, are changing as we get to the next generation.
Okay. Well, building on the conversation around the design process, around trends, I'd like to shift a little to the design process itself, and specifically how our teams, can leverage the data, like Chris had mentioned, what they collect, tools, AI, and bring these ideas to life. At Schaefer, we're seeing, design partners embrace these tools and such practices and use that to help them. So, David, wanted to ask you, how do you see design and emerging technologies shaping the way we approach design for senior living?
Yeah, great question. Very exciting time. Exciting is such a great word, isn't it? We use it all the time. It's a time that is really revolutionizing what's happening in the industry. I realized in September it will be 40 years since I used AutoCAD for the first time. That's a funny joke because at that time everything was hand drafted and AutoCAD was this drafting tool that was frowned upon. Today it has advanced so much, and I think it's in three critical areas. The first being in data-driven decision making, the second being in design integration or operations and generation, and then the third is just in the actual technical side of it. And I want to hit mostly on that decision-making piece. We're using sensors now to understand the movement of people. All right, little participation time. Everybody, I know it's 8:30, but we're going to participate for a second. How many of you know what a traffic study is? Got to raise your hand. Look at that. All right, good. So we do that for vehicles to understand what happens in our community, but we haven't been doing that to study people. And we now have the ability to add sensors to our communities and then take that information in and draw data from it. That data only tells us what is working and what isn't working. So the spaces that aren't utilized, we can now evaluate. We need the human element for that to understand the why. It may be that it may be the visual part of it where it's too bright or not bright enough. It may be that the sound attenuation isn't quite right, or operations isn't using the space correctly. But I believe that it's mostly about belonging. I talk about this a lot now. If we were to walk into this space and it would only be two of us sitting in this room, it would be very awkward. And yet when there's a group of people, it feels more relatable. When you sit at a table with 8 chairs there, somebody might be more invited to sit down with you. But if it was a table with only 2 or 3 chairs, you might not feel the same way. So we experience space in a very unique way, and I don't believe that we're capturing that in our communities today. And that sense of belonging is different for each one of us. For all of you that have taken a DISC test or a Myers-Briggs test, you know that I am not like you, guaranteed. And each one of us, we design these buildings for the typical person. I use the air quotes because there is no such thing as the typical person. And as a designer, when we look at these spaces, we need to be looking at it in order to make people, all people, want to use the spaces and not to just sit inside their residence. So why are we not utilizing these spaces? A lot of it comes down to we're just designing it randomly, and we're not seriously thinking about these spaces. So that, I'll get off my high horse on that one. The second area that technology is being used is the visual generation. We're able to actually create these precedent images from scratch. And those precedent images, we may say we want Victorian or Florida coastal or something like that. And it doesn't give us what our building is going to look like, but it gives us some ideas of what to make the building look like. There's also programming where we can actually put in the data and it'll start to spit out a floor plan for us. Now, I mean that mostly in the sense of how many units we want on the site, where's the daylighting, those kinds of things. We still need to develop the guts of it with the amenity spaces. And then lastly, is that in the developmental and the technical side of it, we're getting to the point where things become more automated, dimensioning, tagging. But even more so is that there's experimenting in throwing it into the computer so that it can start to do quality checks, therefore reducing the amount of RFIs and change orders out in the field. So there's a lot happening in technology, and I'm excited to see it to go from hand drafting in my day to where it's at now.
So we use AI a lot. And we just recently completed, in the building that's just starting construction, a 60,000 square foot clubhouse. And we started using AI with precedent imagery, putting in what we wanted the spaces to look like, and then it would, design the space. And we took those imageries, different architectural interior design styles to our client, and we nailed down the look and feel of the building. And then we applied the images to a conceptual design document after we, did the space plan. And the construction company was able to price out the building within 1 month, which is unheard of. And they said it cut out 4 months worth of work. We were $10 million over budget. At that time, very early in on the design, the client decided to add a couple floor of units above the clubhouse. And in the end, we were under budget when we completed the project. And, we were used to value engineering. Well, we didn't have to value engineer. We went in and they said, well, everything that your options, just tell us what option you wanted because it fits in the budget. So I think AI doesn't delete the designers or the architects. It enhances the information that the client gets to make informed decisions from the beginning.
Yeah, Connie, I completely agree with that. How many of you have ever built a house or significantly remodeled your own residence? From that experience that a design project, a construction project is hundreds, if not thousands of decisions after decisions after decisions, and going back to earlier ones and ratifying them or changing them. And that's the process that we're all in. That's the industry that we're all in. We're using technology to help our designers speed up upfront scoping, helping make their scoping recommendations faster for our clients, helping tie together not just those scoping recommendations, but how do we think those recommendations will help the building perform from a financial standpoint and a lease-up standpoint. We are using AI and technology to help our designers select products that we know are in stock at the price that we want, so that we don't have to go back and revisit selections later on after we find out that they're out of stock or too expensive. And as David said and Connie said, we're using AI to help our teams visualize faster, so the recommendations that are in their head can get put into graphics quicker, and our clients can see them, understand them, react to them, and approve them faster. All that said, it gets our clients to market faster, whether that's a new building that's coming out of the ground or a repurposed, renovated building that needs to get back up and running to increase occupancy. The sooner we can help people do that, the better we can communicate, and the more we can use data and technology to help us do that, it benefits the client, benefits the end residents.
Well, as you know, right now we're in kind of the height of hurricane season. I know climate resiliency has been something that has been talked about at least a lot for us in the Southeast and Florida. Are there, with the data that you guys are collecting and that, are you able to leverage some of those tools to help increase that? Or what is the conversations around that?
Well, it's definitely able to analyze data quicker. And when you put in the data, it's only as good as what you're putting in. And so taking all of the historical information and adding it to it allows us to analyze what to potentially expect. We can't outguess what's going to happen in nature, but being able to say these are the probabilities gives us the ability to design better buildings, stronger buildings, and just anticipate what may happen.
Okay. Well, anybody else have anything to add there?
We had a really interesting project in Boulder, Colorado, which you don't think of in terms of what I'm about to tell you, like flooding. You think about fires potentially out in Colorado, but not flooding. Well, this building, unbeknownst to us, unbeknownst to our client, happened to be in a flood zone because there was a creek nearby. The prior owner hadn't taken care of certain permits, hadn't taken care of certain requirements being in that flood zone. So our team had to do a lot of research to understand what would satisfy the regulations that the city had. The city would not release a permit until we helped our client take care of something that was a past problem. But we were able to use technology, some AI, to really understand the codes, understand what the city needed. End of the day, what we ended up proposing was metal-built cabinetry on the first floor because they wanted to make sure that wood cabinetry would not fail. Weird solution, something that we wouldn't have expected going into the project, but the technology helped us understand the regulations faster and come up with a solution that was palatable to everybody.
You know, what's fascinating is that if you can think about it, it is starting to be produced. And GIS is using things similar to what you're talking about to develop ways that instead of needing to, I'll tell you what, when going through entitlements, you've got to research every setback and height and et cetera, and they're using it in ways in order to be able to tell you what can fit on a site almost instantaneously. And we're not far away from that to be able to tell you how big a building can fit on a site if you want it to have underbuilding parking or surface parking because of flood zones, because of all the setbacks, or maybe there's an easement going through it. It's quite fascinating what might take us weeks currently can end up being within minutes in the future.
Nice. Well, shifting gears a bit, let's talk about supply chain. We're finding more strategic partnership-driven approach can help our owners deliver projects faster and more efficiently. Especially with today's strong demand for the increase towards hospitality. So, Anna, you want to kind of talk to that a little bit for us?
Sure. About 7 or 8 years ago, senior living made a shift in design, and it's shifted to hospitality. So we opened a building in 2019, a clubhouse, and the client said, we want a building and a community that doesn't look like senior living. So it was hip and cool, and it attracted a whole different crowd. And it attracted a lot of people that wanted to live in the building, but they had to wait about 40 years before they were old enough to move in. But when we opened that building, what I realized, the shift, there needed to be a shift in how to procure, because the hospitality world is a whole different world than senior living. And to be able to afford the products is a whole different process. And there's a shift in how we're doing business today. So we do full procurement globally. We were just in China and India a couple months ago meeting with our trade partners. And we can put together full lighting packages, kitchen, baths, the whole 9 yards in a very high quality. We don't do a value engineering, and because we're starting with figuring out the cost of the products up front using factories and other tools and relationships. And that is the hospitality world. And so now our business has totally changed. We are an interior design firm, but we also do global procurement. So we partner with architects and interior designers. We partner with, of course, the client, the developers, the operators, but it's changed how the flow of goods from start to finish, and it's very exciting.
Jeff, from the construction side, what would you say you're seeing for the supply chain and the solutions that you're seeing?
Yeah, I think that, one of the most important things is that, from your side as well, that, our teams are getting involved in very early stages of design so that we can work hand in hand with the design teams to hopefully select products that are more readily available and things that aren't going to be problematic for the project, or if there are certain products that we have to have because of a certain design or a certain desire from a client, then it's working together in the early stages of that design to pre-release those products and get them here in a timely fashion to be able to, execute the project on time and at least being aware of those as opposed to maybe the way things were done a little more traditionally years ago when contractors came in late and then you're finding these things out late in the game. So, I think most of our clients are tending to operate in that fashion now, and it's really important for the success of the project. But, holistically, I don't think, outside of electrical gear, which is just continues to be an issue, and even one of the biggest problems we've had in Florida, I'm sure you've experienced the same, is utility companies and delivery of power transformers. When we get impacted by 2 or 3 hurricanes in a year, that impacts it even more so, and some of those things, unfortunately, none of us have a lot of control over.
Cross-pollinating the topics, AI is able to learn what is in the area in order to use for materials as well. So for the design side of it, understanding what is local, what is regional, to pull from that is an assistant in the design aspect as well.
Yeah, we've seen the same thing, David, where we've developed some proprietary technology that helps us integrate our fabric supply chain. So when our interior design team is specifying upholstered furniture, they can see what fabrics are in stock, at what quantities, at what prices, and make sure that what they're picking today is going to be available when that order gets placed next week or 2 weeks from now. That's significantly helped reduce project time and going back and making reselections and changes. We've also done a lot of what Jeff mentioned. We're seeing a lot of REITs in the renovation and the CapEx business, changing operators in certain buildings and then having to rebrand these buildings and spend some money upfitting them in a really short amount of time. So taking on a suite or a portfolio of 20 projects, we've got to get out in front of the supply chain immediately, start talking to the furniture manufacturers, start talking to the flooring manufacturers, understand what's available, what will be available, because there are certain times that these buildings have to be up and running and leasing and not have construction activities taking place. So if we're not making the right decisions at the outset to make sure that the flooring can be in place and in stock and the furniture can quickly follow it, it's not going to serve the needs of both the owner and the operator clients. So that supply chain integration becomes increasingly critical when speed is the currency of the project that you're designing.
Well, shifting into construction costs and the broader market, between pricing pressures, material increases that we've all seen recently, the updates to the 2025 codes, all of our teams are feeling the impact in different ways, but Jeff, specifically on the construction side, how is your team seeing that?
Yeah, I thought I'd start with probably the elephant in the room, and that is the famous word tariffs, because everybody wants to ask about it and know about it, and I am certainly not an expert when it comes to understanding all tariffs. I'm not sure any of us are, because it's constantly evolving as negotiations continue to get done with other countries, but I thought I'd at least try to put some context around it. So if you all had to take a stab at the percentage of materials across all of construction, so not one particular product or product type, what would you guess the amount of materials we import on a national basis? Any guesses? 60? 7. Yeah, it's a pretty staggering number. So, when all the sort of anxiety over tariffs, while it is a potential impact, which I'm going to get to in a minute, in the grand scheme of the scale of things, it really affects some key products, which is kind of what I want to drill down on. When you take lumber, for example, as a whole, we import about 30% of lumber in the country. 85% of that 30% comes from Canada. However, there's an agreement in place called the U.S.-Mexico-Canadian Agreement, which relieves soft lumber from the tariff impact. So right now, that lumber that we're importing from Canada has not been impacted yet. So, for example, we're talking about working with design teams equally with us, working with our subcontractors and understanding we may have subcontractor A that their price is lower, but they're looking to source, from out of country. The subcontractor B, their price is a little higher, but they can locally source it. That may be cheaper in the long run, right? Because we're going to avoid paying that tariff. So it's just kind of understanding what those subcontractors are planning and what they're doing. Steel and aluminum is another big one. We import about 25% of steel and about 50% of aluminum. About 80% of that aluminum, again, comes from Canada, which is again protected by the U.S.-Canada-Mexico agreement. When it comes to the steel, it affects a lot of products, obviously structural framing, curtain wall, facade, so there are certainly things that we need to be looking at there. Is it able to be locally sourced? Is it not? And then what are those impacts? And I'll get to in a minute maybe some recommendations on how to at least build contingency into projects should you face some of these things. Copper is another big one. We import a lot of copper out of Chile. That tariff is currently 50%. It impacts wiring, plumbing, HVAC. You see in a lot of, particularly in senior housing, a lot of the plumbing piping is going away from copper. You're using PEX piping and different things that are acceptable in residential type of construction. So I think it's some of those things that you're just looking at those products. But I think just from, we get asked this question a lot, like how do we account for this, particularly when we're very early stages of budgeting a project. I think if you sort of start to break it down, if you say materials as a whole are roughly 40% of a project, and you said if you want to be more conservative, 10 to 15% of those might be imported, and then you take a rough estimate of 30% tariff or whatever you want to use, at least you can begin to come up with a number that says, hey, our maximum exposure, is X on a particular project. So, I think from our side, we are really focused with our teams on accelerating buyout of these subcontractors and these materials in procurement, and so that we know, what we've got in the very early stages once we've gotten to the point of pricing the GMP on a project. So, I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
That's very good information. We are seeing a lot of the same, and the key is much like they're doing early in the design process, getting involved early, making sure we can procure those materials, and then absolutely buyout of our trade partners as soon as the contract is signed is number one, making sure we're getting ahead of it. Like you said, I fully agree there.
What's fascinating about this is we get our information from news channels that are trying to create shock and awe in order to get people to watch. And when you listen to the experts, it's very different. And so when listening to non-experts, it creates this uncertainty and this fear, and it paralyzes our industry. I recommend reaching out to Clancy and Thais, to your partners, to find out what's really happening out there, because it's not as bad as what the news channels are trying to portray.
So what we find is it depends on where in the world we're importing. In some countries, the governments in those countries will subsidize the factories. When COVID hit, a lot of the Chinese factories were subsidized. So the tariffs, the 10% tariff would only cost 3%. And depending on where the goods are coming from, a 30% tariff is nothing. So it depends on where you're, where you are in the country. And, one of our projects got hit really hard because out west, I guess they ended up paying $2 million in tariffs at the very beginning. But now things have kind of shaked out, and they've started 2 more buildings. So it really depends on what part of the building and where the products are coming from. We were starting 2 huge purchasing projects right when the tariffs hit. And our clients were very anxious. And a boardroom table that I was specifying that from the U.S., it was like $3,500. All of a sudden, it became $9,000, and that was within the country. So a tariff doesn't really mean, there's a lot of hype, but a lot of times the U.S. goods go up when you start talking about tariffs. So we ended up importing for $5,000, a beautiful table. So most of our work is, procurement is about 80% domestic and 20% international. But 80% domestic means that we're buying from domestic companies. They too, the furniture industry is all over the world. There's few companies that make everything in the U.S., but most furniture manufacturers in the U.S. buy all the pieces and parts from different factories across the world. For instance, in Italy, the way the factories are set up, one factory will make the backs of the chairs. Another factory makes the seats of the chairs. And it's kind of like that here in the U.S. Furniture manufacturers will buy the legs from one factory and buy the frames from another factory. So a lot of times when we're importing, 50 chairs, because we want the look, the customization that you can't do here, they arrive a lot sooner than the domestic products, because they're short a few legs. So you have to wait a month to get the legs in. So, talking about procurement, you really have to talk about procurement with people that have been doing it and know the business, as opposed to the news company. It's a totally different ballgame.
Yeah, I think an underlying theme here, whether it's construction or procurement, is make sure you're working with somebody who has a diverse and sophisticated supply chain strategy. We're lucky as part of Direct Supply that we've got supply chain teams, we've got sales teams, we've got a couple dozen people who are every day working on supply chain strategies and staying on top of the daily changes and what's going on in the tariff news. As Connie said, we've been able to source furniture from different parts of the country, different parts of the world, where sometimes it's from Canada, protected under the USMCA. Sometimes we're moving production more domestically to avoid tariffs that we see are coming. We've seen that happen with P-tax when we specify those. Production's moved from China to Thailand, but depending on what happens with China, maybe it'll move back to China in a few months. So having that flexibility, working with partners who have a deep and sophisticated supply chain is going to help mitigate risk on any project, whether it's renovation or new construction. You just need to be working with the right people who can have those sophisticated conversations.
Well, a lot of great information. We could probably sit up here and talk all day about a lot of this, but each of our panelists has a few slides they're going to share with us now. So Jeff, if you want to start.
Yeah, sure. And before I do that, I think I'd just make one more comment unrelated to tariffs and the construction trends of what we're seeing. In our company is all southeast, so Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Florida. But we've seen across all those offices, pricing being relatively stable and flat right now. So while I know you'd love to hear it's going down, we're not really seeing that, but we are seeing subcontractors a little hungrier for work, pricing a little flatter than it had been, which is good news for all of us.
Yep.
So I thought I would share, sort of jumping back to where we started earlier, a few of the projects we're currently working on. This particular project's in Southwest Florida. We're on their existing campus, which is a little more coastal out on Venice Beach, which we're adding 2 independent living apartment buildings and a very resort-style wellness center and pool. And those, when I say apartment buildings, one of them's 31 apartments, the other one is 23. So, compared to what scale of some of these apartment buildings used to be like, these are much smaller apartment buildings, which are attractive to a lot of seniors, where they're not, hung up in a high-rise tower or some of the other really large-scale apartment buildings before. This same community has acquired a 50-acre parcel of property, which is what you see on the screen, to develop, which will start construction in a couple of years in early stages of design now. But you can see, even taking that sort of a step further, a mix of apartment buildings, but still smaller scale. They're more like 50-unit apartment buildings, and then a host of cottages surrounding the community. So they're going to have mixed options for, and it's all independent living on this particular campus, but cottages, villas, and then apartment-style living with a host of amenities. Connie mentioned pickleball earlier. You can see near there's a dog park. They're going to use this waterway as a feature for residents to kayak, to be close to the water, even though this particular property is a little bit inland from their existing main campus. Those of you who live in the Raleigh area may recognize this. This is a tower building. This is on a community in an area called North Hills, which is central Raleigh area. And somebody mentioned earlier about being around folks of other ages, being in kind of a mixed-use development. If you know North Hills at all, that's exactly what that is. We built apartment buildings for younger folks immediately adjacent to this campus, but this campus had some existing lower-rise apartment buildings But people wanted to be in that community, and so this particular owner decided to build a tower right in top of this existing community because it's in such close proximity to everything that's going on in that North Hills area. And then another project down in the Wilmington area, again, just sort of another product type for independent living. These are more, you can see kind of on the, I guess, top left of the top right picture is more of an apartment style building, smaller scale, but then the buildings to the right are a little bit more villa style, smaller in scale. You know, I think only like 8 or 10 apartments in those villas. And then a communal area, I think David alluded to earlier, just places where you can see in that center sort of a garden and gathering area for residents. And just some interior photos from some of these projects. Dining is a huge trend in what we're seeing in senior housing. I think just options is the big word there, providing different options for where residents aren't stuck to just one traditional dining room. They've got bistros, bar settings, just different types of options within their community. And then, of course, we kind of talked a lot about already, resort-style amenities. We have sauna on one of our projects. There's an indoor pickleball athletic room, pools, and a lot of great amenities. So I will pass them along.
Indoor pickleball, that's a new one. I haven't seen that one yet. So I talked about the survey that we do every couple of years about what do seniors really want, as it talks about designing for the next generation of seniors, and take a look at the graph, right? The full-size kitchen and then the yellow wedge, dining and food venues. More than 50% of what seniors want moving into a building is surrounding kitchens and food and social spaces for dining. So that's got to be top of mind when you're designing the apartments and also designing the public spaces. The image in the bottom left is probably a good mental concept of what somebody wants when they say they want a full-size kitchen, and that's not pragmatic to put into a studio apartment or a one-bedroom apartment or even a two-bedroom apartment. But how, as a designer, a developer, an owner, can you get some of those elements into the apartment itself? But then how do you bring the social elements of that into the common areas and make sure that there's variety in the common areas, people can socialize, congregate, and live their life around food and food service like they have for many generations in the kitchen, which is the soul of the home. The other one that interested me here was the light blue in the upper middle, outdoor amenities. That whole concept of biophilic design, access to natural light, access to greenery, critically important. So bringing the outside in and making sure that we're getting our seniors outside and not just keeping them inside is really, really important. Blending the idea of dining venues and choices, selections for seniors and technology. This is a project we worked on in the Sacramento area. We use a 360-degree camera technology called HoloBuilder to go into a community, take pictures of the existing conditions. And then later on, a week, a month, a year later, when we're continuing design work, we can see every light, every outlet, every space in this dining room, and make really smart design decisions without having to go back to the building. So it keeps our team really, really nimble. Great way to use software to help improve the design process. We overlay that with Revit. David talked about the evolution of AutoCAD to new tools. So designing in 3 dimensions, taking the concepts and the new ideas of what we want to bring to this space. We use the Revit platform, and very recently the AI technologies have started to advance tremendously quickly. So taking what's a sketchy look and a sketchy renovation or sketchy rendering in Revit can quickly turn into a full-on, nearly photorealistic rendering using some additional software called Enscape. What you can see here, not just the great visualization that helps our clients make decisions quickly, but taking a space and scaling it down. The back center, there's some more intimate dining spaces at the back of the building that are a little bit shorter, have some banquettes in them. On the near right, the same thing. So even within the same dining room, we're trying to create different spaces so that people can dine where they feel comfortable. Is it a more snug Inglenook-like setting, or is it a larger volume ceiling in the middle? And then lastly, playing up the idea of design and supply chain. We've got the luxury of working with a great supply chain team. So this is a neat collection called the Kalitsi collection. Oftentimes when our designers see that there's a need in the market, they will go to our supply chain teams and say, help us develop something that we think will really hit with today's seniors. So the story behind this was the need for smaller scale but elegant seating that could hit some smaller spaces, either in common areas or resident apartments. So our designers worked with supply chain. You can see in that upper left image a bunch of sketches, a lot of sketches back and forth with the manufacturer. They did some prototyping, and then we did a soft release to certain clients, and then this caught on really well, so able to launch this fully after doing some really smart integration between the design team and the global supply chain. So again, work with folks who have the sophistication to bring these kinds of things to market. On to David.
Next. So we talked a little bit about what's happening hospitality-wise, and the title here, Lifestyle Drives First Impressions. I think it's very important to create a community that creates multiple first impressions, things that make you want to be pulled into the space. As architects and interior designers, we looked at this typical central corridor that you would have in a building, and we actually pulled it to the exterior. So in this particular community, you were walking along the windows, you filter through some spaces and then get to actually doored or roomed spaces beyond that, which would be to the right of the screen. What's really fascinating is that it's created a lot more spontaneity, a lot more spontaneous conversations, and it's towards the front of the community, which invites people in and gives people the sense that when you're in this community, you're going to be active. This project is in Wilmington, and it is actually connected to the greater community. I talked about interacting with other generations, and you'll see a building that's kind of in the center and it's got a circle. Yes, we have a circle in a building as an architect. You don't see that very often, probably won't again. But that space actually is the image on the lower left, and it is a restaurant that is open to the public. It has become known that you can go use that, and our residents interact with the community by attending that restaurant. That whole building there, if you are able to make out where there's a service drive, everything to the lower left is actually, it's got an indoor pool, it has a large fitness, a salon, it has the spa, and it's all per membership from outside of this actual community. It drove down the costs of the independent living so dramatically. Even before it opened, there was over 800 outside of this community that were registered to be using that space. It was a very creative way to mix and bring down costs for the actual residents. And then when we're talking about evidence-based design, this particular image is special in the sense that if you look at the amount of ways that lighting is used, so you have natural light that comes in, but we have a way to kind of close that off with the drapery. In addition to that, there is a cove light that runs around the acoustics on the ceiling, and that creates an indirect lighting, and then you have direct lighting. So we're able to control the lighting in such ways that people want to use that space and they're not driven off. In addition, that sound attenuation on the ceiling helps to break up. You can see how much hard surface is in there. This space is so well used that it was actually surprising. But here's why it was surprising, is that the executive director said, had we have value engineered out some of those pieces that you see there, it would have cost us more because the space wouldn't have been used. And that alone, that one comment, really drove me to look more into how we use spaces.
So again, I go back to global buying power and the cost efficiency with that. We're able to design beautiful spaces at very amazing prices. For furniture, it used to be that you would have to have a very high volume amount of furniture to customize. So we have connections and working with factories that we can design smaller spaces in senior living, hospitality, hotels, and resorts, and get custom furniture that gives off a certain look and a certain use capabilities. For senior living, there are requirements that you need for the residents to be able to functionally work within the space. So we're very lucky to have found those resources. AI. We're a full-service interior design firm and procurement. AI is amazing. Typically, we start out using AI for conceptual design, and then we get into space planning and figuring out the intricacies of the spaces using SketchUp and Revit. Then we pop back into AI and in rendering AI, and there's several different AIs that are getting better and better. And these are two different shots of a dining room, and you can't do everything in AI. One thing you can't do is put carpet on the floors, but you can change what tables look like and the material of the tables, the lights, the color, and the client can make decisions on which way they want to go for image. And we find that very valuable because you can also get into pricing at that time. And again, you're not value engineering your projects and going backwards. You're always moving forwards. We typically, our clients like the boutique, tailored, creativity at scale, vibes. Every project is different. Every client has different wants and needs per community. And I'm always amazed at CEOs getting into the idea of what they want on a shelf. One CEO is a healthcare building, and it was a rehabilitation center, and it was a library. Well, a library has books, but in his mind, he went to a hotel and found this beautiful shelf. So it took us a couple tries to get the decorations right on the shelves. But this is the extent of what our clients are looking for. They want very intimate spaces that really help elevate the look and feel of the building, but also the experience of the resident.
Thank you all. That's very good information. Appreciate the slides there. We ran a little bit long. I think we have time for one question from the audience if anybody has a question for our panelists. All right, well, no questions. Sounds like we gave them all the information they needed. So thank you to our panelists. Appreciate that. Connie, David, Chris, Jeff.
Thanks, Design and Build panel, for getting the conference off to a wonderful start. We're going to take a 20-minute break. Feel free to get